and linguistic considerations. And it's actually for both assessment and intervention. But the reason I start with this is that often when we misdiagnose or miss children, is for our lack of understanding of what's going on sociolinguistically or culturally, okay? So, so my main goal in this part is for you to think about how you can become more cross-culturally competent, how you can evaluate and see a child from a cross-cultural perspective, okay? So what that means, it means that you understand and you view the child with the richness and limitations of their context, the sociocultural context in which they live and they operate. And you think about ways that value who they are. Often the problems come when we see them as having less or being deficient culturally. I don't mean in terms of language, but culturally, they don't do X, they don't do Y, they don't treat children in a special way. So what I want us to start learning is to look at these families from a valuing what they bring to us culturally, okay? And in that way, you can build in your assessment and your intervention, okay? So basically it's understand, and actually the human mind works in categorizing. So intelligence is our ability to categorize. The problem comes when we see these categories and start putting value judgments to them, okay? So it's okay to observe that a certain group doesn't talk at the table. That's okay. So the problem is when we start putting value judgments on the doesn't talk at the table, okay? So how do we capitalize on their cultural characteristics to enhance our assessment and our intervention? And often the first thing we need to do is the self-awareness. And it's interesting, you're all pretty seasoned speech pathologists, but when I ask my students, so tell me about your culture, they look at me like blank eye and say they don't have a culture. It's like, come on, there's this culture in all of us. So just starting to recognize where we are culturally in things as basic and stereotypical as holidays, all the way to how we interact with our children. And we'll talk a lot about that, because how we interact with our children actually shapes up a lot of the language children use. So there's things that we assume are not related to culture that are, okay? So we'll talk about some areas that we can look at today, and we can use to at least judge where we can find differences that might explain language behavior or our relations with the families. And what I'm going to do today is give you some characteristics of some Latin American cultures. The danger is that I don't want you to think that I'm encouraging to have stereotypes of cultures. I'll explain it now, but the reason is culture is dynamic. Culture is always changing. So we can't assume, they are from Somalia, therefore they behave this way. Or they are from China, therefore they behave this way. What happens is, because culture is dynamic, there's interactions with other cultures, with our own United States cultures, multiple cultures, that we can't pigeonhole people in different categories. So what I'm going to try to do is give you some areas to think about in the assessment and intervention that might be different, okay? And then we're not going to get to this last point here on this slide today, but I actually feel very strongly about it, and so I hope that we all get to a place where we value our differences, that is not being tolerated, you know. So there's workshops on tolerance, it's like, wait a minute, I'm a minority, I don't want to be tolerated, I want to be valued, okay? So for me, the term tolerance has negative connotations. For some other people, that's where they are, okay? For me, I want you to think about the different cultures in a way that you value them, not accept them, because it's kind of like tolerance. Okay, I'll put up with you. I'll see your differences. But we need to get to the point where we value those differences and we work with those differences as a strength. When the schools see their cultural diversity as a problem, then we're talking about tolerance and acceptance, but not moving to how do we work best with this family based on their cultural characteristics. Okay, so it's valuing those differences so you can act in a way that it enhances their child.